Today on Locked On Canadiens, have the Canadiens screwed up Jesse Ylonen's development?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1074 of Locked On Canadiens. We are your daily Habs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day free and available on YouTube, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. My name is Laura Saab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla of Habs Eyes of the Prize. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I have driven literally back and forth across this entire state for stuff today through the backwoods of nowhere. But I am actually really good. We've got a great show planned out. Laura has a very special guest lined up for tomorrow as well. But all in all, the sun's out shining. Spring has officially sprung. It's not false spring anymore. I think we're not going to get any more snow anytime soon. So I am about as happy as I could be at this point.
Here in Montreal, we had a heat wave throughout the May long weekend, and I was a little bit dramatic with my opener, with my teaser for this episode. I don't necessarily think the Montreal Canadiens have screwed up Jesse Ylonen's development, but I do want to get into this topic because multiple listeners have been asking about him as part of our mailbag questions. But first, I also wanted to mention that I don't necessarily think this is kind of a definitive indictment or anything, because I just want to know, Scott, in your mind, should Ylonen have been a top six forward?
It's hard for me to say this season. I said he suffered a lot from Charles Hudon syndrome. So did Raphael Harvey-Pinard, in that his brief appearances prior to this season in the NHL have been positive. He's shown, good promise, great speed, great stick handling, a very lethal shot in these games. And then this year, the wheels just kind of fell off for him. Last year in 37 games, he had 16 points, 6 goals, 10 assists on a team that struggled with injuries and was one of the worst teams in the NHL. And with the Rocket, he put up 32 points in 39 games. He was very clearly deserving of that call up to Montreal last year. This year in 59 games, 8 points, 4 goals, 4 assists, a couple of really nice shootout highlights. But just watching him from game to game, he seemed like a player that had kind of lost what made him not, I don't want to say a good player, because he was a very good player when he was drafted and in Finland, but what made him, that earned him that call up to the NHL here is that the speed was kind of gone, a lot of second guessing. There wasn't that same aggressive instinct with his shot. And part of that is he was playing mostly fourth line minutes because, well, he hadn't really earned a bit higher spot in the lineup. If you had told me that he, played on Nick Suzuki's wing for a few games last year, I would have believed it. Yeah. This year, he didn't really get that. And some of that is, well, Josh Anderson was in his way. And also Alex Newhook joined the team here. And you had Michael Bezzetta keeping a lineup spot, etc. The spaces for him got less and less. I don't think there could have been any harm trying him there. But I also understand that Martin St. Louis is teaching and coaching this team in a way that it is, you do not just get handed things. You earn your spot in the lineup. And Ylonen really didn't do that for the team this year. And it's unfortunate because I like him as a player. I still think there is a player there. I believe he is an RFA with arbitration rights this offseason. I'm going to be very interested to see what they do, because I think there is depth scoring talent there. I think he could be, a 30-point NHL guy, which isn't, setting the world on fire, but is a very effective piece. But he'll be 25 in October. So
Yeah.
he is what he is.
Right. And that's the thing, because he is a depth piece right now. Because the reason that I ask this is because a lot of our mailbag questions are centered around what they could get for him, or do they unload him, or rightfully, there's an assumption that there's not really a place for him in next year's lineup. You know, we talked about the musical chairs yesterday on yesterday's episode. But then there are a couple of readers that are also like, well, look at the minutes that he's been playing and look at the lines he's been played on. Not necessarily, he didn't stand a chance, but it's not necessarily all him. And admittedly, you and me here on this podcast, whenever we talk about him, we say that he never really grabbed the opportunity by the horns, right? Like that was our conversation. But then also there were times where we'd be like, can you just play this guy on the power play and see what he's got? Like there was a lot of back and forth in our opinions. And so, given these mailbag questions, I kind of wanted to get your feel on, is it the player? Is it the team? Is it a combination, like a perfect storm of factors where, you mentioned Josh Anderson being in his way, Alex Newhook being in his way or being ahead of him. But in my mind, when you are that kind of player and Josh Anderson is not performing well, like the coaching staff should have stopped trying to make fetch happen and let Ylonen play there instead.
And that's the hard part, is that like you want players to earn their spot, especially in a team where you don't want complacency to set in. Complacency is how you get teams that don't win when it counts, because everyone is settled in. They don't want to face the harsh truths here. And I think out of anyone on this team, no one is probably harder on Jesse Ylonen than himself going in this year, because he knows he is capable of more. And I think he has a style of play that going forward for this Canadiens team, it could be a very effective, and he might be the third line winger next year. That would be fine. But again, this is a lineup that is going to have some weight that still needs to be shed to open up those spots. And there's no guarantee that he just gets one of them. The emergence of Joshua Waugh has made that hard. You have guys like Xavier Simoneau, you have Sean Farrell, etc. in the AHL that he hasn't earned that spot. And I'm wondering if they bring him back, they go, we're going to try this in camp again. Can you stick in the bottom six? If not, we're going to put you on waivers and send you to the Rocket, or maybe trade you afterwards to a team that might have space for you. The timer on this one is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. We know what Michael Pezzetta is. Michael Pezzetta is what he is at this point. We're not expecting more of that, not because we don't think he is a piece. We talked about him in yesterday's episode, but we expect more of Jesse Ylonen because he has those skills to be a second power play forward. He has a great shot, good skating, really good playmaking ability. And I try to not play the appeal to authority, but like I've watched him in the AHL and watched why he moved up to the NHL and what made him effective with the Rocket. And then this year was just like a shell of a player, missing assignments in the defensive zone. That is he just trying to, beat the puck out and, create odd man breaks for himself to create those opportunities. And I also at this time trust the coaching staff that if he is back, be like, hey, let's work on what we want from you this year, whether it's assignments or just little things. I believe they can get him back to that guy, but I can't shake the feeling that if Kent Hughes is making an offseason trade of some kind in here, Jesse Ylonen is going to be part of that, not only because he doesn't really have a guaranteed spot, but because it's what's best for the player. And Kent Hughes has shown he likes to do what is best for these players, to give them that opportunity, because he doesn't want to hold them back. There's no reason to do that, at least, not from his point of view.
Right. And so you kind of took part of the topic out of my mind there. Just really quickly, assuming they do not trade him, what do you do? Do you give him a bridge deal? Do you sign him to like a 1.5?
You sign him for, $850,000, $900,000, a little raise from what he got this year. And you're on your 1-year RFA contract. Prove that you belong here. Basically, Michael Pezzetta did that. And he went 1 year, a little bit longer extension. And that's only 2 years. But, he is basically on prove it deal time. That's it.
Yes. Okay. So that was really like the conclusion I had. I didn't think that you would go as low. I thought there would be a little bit more just because, in this economy. But in the meantime, we are going to talk a little bit. I didn't get a chance to ask Scott his opinion about whether or not the Canadiens pick should be traded, and we will get into that in our next segment. But first, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed. And that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Because when you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. And with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed data in the US. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offers good for only a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/LOCKEDON. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need it. So let's talk about draft, trading that fifth pick. So when you were on vacation, when we first got the news that the Canadiens would be drafting fifth overall in the first round, and then we kind of did separate reaction posts to this because I had a couple of days of reaction and then you had a couple of days without me. So there are a couple of trade scenarios that came up in our mailbag. But the first question I have for you, Scott, is should the Canadiens even entertain the idea of trading that fifth overall draft pick, knowing that they are expected to get better in the coming years, and this might be the last time in a long time they get to draft in the top five?
You should always entertain ideas if you think the price is going to be right there. Like we talked about with Hedy Kalakash, is that, hey, they are interested in Beckett Seneca. At fifth overall, not maybe the best choice, not the worst choice that could be made, but if they were to trade down and recoup other assets or lose the terrible contract on their books, and they still get their guy, shed a contract and open up that cap space to do other things like we will talk about later on in this show a bit, I'm okay with that. You should always be listening. That doesn't mean you have to take any of them seriously. A good GM will listen to offers. Whether or not he is actually serious about like following through on them is up in the air. But I think Kent Hughes is always listening to things. He likes to wheel and deal at the NHL draft to move picks here and there and maybe to find guys they are looking for. I think if they are serious about drafting Beckett Seneca, which who the hell knows, then I think you have to you have to be very serious about potentially trading down from fifth overall, because you have the opportunity to find a team who might want one of those defensemen, whether it be Parika, whether it be Dickinson, whether it be Bouillon, etc., who are going to want to be in that spot, and they don't want to miss that run on those top defensemen. They're going to want to move up, and they're going to want your fifth overall pick. And at that point, you're like, okay, I hold the cards in my hand now. I can either pick other players off your roster that I might want in this trade, or you are taking someone from me to move up in that kind of thing there, which is rare that you'd see the Canadiens giving up two pieces, but shedding a deal like we've talked about is not the worst idea they've had. I like the idea of staying, especially with like TJ Ginla and Caden Lindstrom and Ivan Demidov and etc. But if they're really serious about Beckett Seneca or even a Cole Yzerman, I think trading down might be the smarter idea in that spot, just because you can do so much in moving down to help your team longer term potentially.
So in principle, I agree with you in that you should always entertain all scenarios, right? And I think ultimately when the decision gets made is when you see who's left there, right? So the first four picks have gone and you see who's left in that 10-minute window or whatever it is. You've already assessed the market. You've already made your calls. You already know what other people are offering you for that pick. And that's when you make that decision. Because for me, if the Canadiens, like we talked about the 5-year plan, if the Canadiens are supposed to get better next year, they should, in theory, be drafting outside the top 10. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they'll have a top 10 pick, but the way the plan is supposed to go, they should be outside the top 10, and they should never see it again for the next 10 years, right? They should the way that Kent Hughes keeps talking, the way that Jeff Gordon keeps talking, the way that I believe they've been mandated to run this team, they should never be in that top 5 for a long time. Like if they're back in that top 5, something went really wrong. Now, in the past, as we talked about yesterday, and also not that much longer before that, the Canadiens have had a top 3 pick that they've squandered, right? Like they made the wrong choice, and also development was part of it. But whatever it was, those third overall picks did not pan out. They simply did not, right? And so at this point, you kind of have to look at it and go, I need to just pick the best player available that is available to me at 5th, because this kind of caliber player, if it's available to me next year, it's because they made a huge drop and either every other GM have lost their mind or something went wrong with the player. Like his interviews were terrible, or the combine turnout was not great. Scott, you have been looking very pensive. Have you been doing some math?
I'm trying to also figure out this stupid Sean Monahan trade condition again, because there's the potential that the Canadiens could have a top 10 pick next year. But if I'm understanding this correctly, is that if Calgary's pick is in the top 10 next year, the Canadiens will receive Florida's first round pick instead, based on, I believe, the Matthew Tkachuk trade. But that's only if they receive Florida's first round pick in that deal, which is also conditional, which this whole trade condition thing, if somebody can email me to make this all make sense very simply again, please do.
Yes, please, because we have a listener question about it and I cannot figure it out myself. I've literally, the question came up like a week and a half ago, and I've still been trying to figure it out.
So if Calgary's pick is not top 10, Montreal will receive the Calgary pick. If Florida's pick is not a top 10, it's the better pick between the two of them. We will also receive a 2025 4th round pick.
It's a whole thing.
Yes, and if Calgary's pick is first overall, Montreal receives a 2025 3rd and the better of Calgary and Florida's 2026 first round pick. Oh my God, this is so. The way I see it is that the Canadiens are going to have another first round pick potentially next year, no matter what. My hope is that it is, respect to our Flames friends, but I hope it's terrible. And I hope that for whatever reason, the Matthew Tkachuk condition doesn't get met. So all we have is the Calgary one, because I would like that a second lottery pick in there when they're supposed to be contending is found money. You get another top 10 pick when you're pushing for a playoff spot. Hell yeah, brother. Sign me up on that. Back to the main thing, though, is that, yes, this is that opportunity. The last year that we really want them to be picking in that top 10. We want that improvement next year, not picking in the top 10. Picking in, 15, 16-ish, whatever, is okay, is fine. That's progress. But if this is your last chance to really take a swing at it, and we're going to talk about a lot of these other forward prospects and stuff, this is the year to potentially do that right now, because you might not get that chance next year. And if you do, then we have a lot of questions about the state of this franchise. I think if you get an offer you can't refuse, we will take on X contract or whatever.
We'll take Josh Anderson. The Canadiens will be like, yes.
And that's the thing is I am looking directly at Josh Anderson or even potentially Yoel Armia. Yoel Armia being someone that I think
I'm not giving up the 5th for Yoel Armia to get rid of Yoel Armia.
If they're giving up Yoel Armia, I think there's also other pieces moving in that. It's not as simple as 5th and Josh Anderson and we're moving down. Again, it feels weird to be like, we're giving up a higher pick and a player, but it is a player whose contract I think the Canadiens are desperate to lose at this point. Mm-hmm. I think that is the point. If they're not willing to take on a contract to get something off the books here, then you're not, then you hang up the phone and say, call me back when you are, basically. That's exactly. That is what I am holding out on right now.
So we also got will you trade down to Calgary so that they can take TJ Ginla and you get something in return? And I don't know. Like, if TJ Ginla is available, don't you just take him? Like,
Yes,
instead of
and that's
letting
exactly
Calgary
it.
have him. Like,
I'm looking at Tankathon right now, and they have us taking Cole Iserman, and TJ Ginla's at 11th, where the Flames passed on them. The
yeah,
Flames
that's not
passing on a Ginla, I think, would cause the world to burn down. But if they're trading
no.
up, I think they have someone in mind.
Right. And speaking of trading, I do want to talk real quick about Nikolaj Ehlers. Scott, he's been on your covet list for a long time. So let's get into it in our next segment. All right, let's do this. Nikolaj Ehlers as a trade target. Now, Scott, I would say we've been doing this podcast now. This is our 5th season that we're completing. And Nikolaj Ehlers has come up as a trade target every single year in some form or fashion. We hate the coward Mark Scheifele, but we do like Nikolaj Ehlers. Would you like to get into a scenario, or would you like us to speculate on a scenario that would involve him coming to Montreal?
Boy, howdy would I.
To lay it all out, preparing for this for a year.
I love Nikolaj Ehlers. I've wanted Nikolaj Ehlers for years because he's always seems like the guy who is the odd man out, regardless of what team or what coach is in Winnipeg. Paul Maurice or Rick Bowness or Scott Arniel or whomever. It has always felt like.
To do with him.
And the thing is, the answer is you don't need to do anything. He's great. He's a fantastic player. He's 28 years old. He has 1 year left this upcoming season at $6 million. If you are trading for Nikolaj Ehlers, you're announcing that we have intentions to actually be a serious push forward team this year. And Rick Bowness is kind of left. Nikolaj Ehlers seemingly kept getting demoted on his lines in the playoffs when the Jets were paper tigering, frauding, screaming, crying, throwing up, whatever in the playoffs. And Nikolaj Ehlers and Cole Perfetti, etc., felt like the guys who were singled out for whatever reason and demoted down the lineup, not given the ice time. Nikolaj Ehlers this year put up 61 points in 82 games, put up 38 and 45 the year before, 55 and 62, 46 and 47, 58 and 71, 37 and 62, 60 and 82, 64 and 82, 38 and 72 in his first full season with the Jets there. The playoff numbers don't look great, but the Jets as a whole in the playoffs have just grossly underperformed all the time. He's a left winger that I go, if you were trading for Nikolaj Ehlers, your second line all of a sudden becomes Ehlers, Doc, and Alex Newhook. And then on your third line, you can have Joshua Waugh, Christian Dvorak, Yoel Armia, or Brendan Gallagher, or whomever, and you're instantly a much deeper team in that regard. Your top line being what is. You could put Nikolaj Ehlers on your top line, and like we talked about, moving Caulfield around to see if he can thrive away from Suzuki. This is a possibility for that. There's going to be a team that is going to potentially get Nikolaj Ehlers this year. If I am the Canadiens, I'm not trading the 5th overall pick, but if I'm looking at Calgary's first round pick potentially next year, which could be Florida's, which means it'll probably be in the 20s or something. Once we actually have the actual details on that, because God, it makes my head hurt trying to think about it. You can make a package deal here to make something happen. We have a lot of defensemen in this organization. The Jets are in need of some defensive help to rebuild some of that defensive group that they've been missing since Jacob Trouba was traded or left. They need help on that side. They need a potential goalie behind Connor Hellebuck at this point. They have a lot of goaltending prospects that are going to be coming up in the next couple of years. Can they make something happen here? He's on an expiring deal. He's a very good player. It's just if the fit isn't there and he wants out, what are you going to do? Like, I'm looking at the Winnipeg Jets roster next year. The coward Mark Scheifele signed for forever. Kyle Connor's got 2 years left. Nikolaj Ehlers is UFA after this season. Alex Iafallo's UFA after this season. Nino Niederreiter signed for 3 more years. Gabe Velarde's RFA. Adam Lowry's got 2 more years. They're a team that is going to be shedding a lot of contracts by the end of next year, or that are unrestricted free agents already. And boy, if Ehlers doesn't want to be there for a rebuild or whatever it might be, I think you really got to ask the question, can we get this done? And it's the kind of bold move I think Kent Hughes really would like. No one saw Kirby Dach coming. All the talk's been Trevor Zegras. What if he goes a slightly older player, trades for him, and then, puts in an extension there if they manage to shed some of that cap salary in a trade where they move down to 9th and Josh Anderson is gone. And all of a sudden, hey, look, Nikolaj Ehlers gets an extension in Montreal for 3 or 4 years at a reasonable, modest raise. Everything's coming up Montreal at that point. And this is, and I cannot emphasize this enough before everyone starts yelling at us, pure speculation and a pipe dream potentially, but one that I think fits the Canadiens' timeline really well.
It's the off season. We're allowed to have some fun, Scott. That's actually all we've got because we have to do this show every single week, every single day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your team every day. And some days we just want to have fun with the trades and rumor speculation and have our dream scenarios. We will have a very special guest coming on tomorrow. But also real quick, Scott, I do want to say, if not Nikolaj Ehlers, is there another player in the NHL that you kind of covet in that same way? Whereas, like, it would be nice and they don't seem to necessarily fit on their team, but it's not their fault.
Yeah, this is the hardest part, is that there's a lot of players potentially moving around. Nikolaj Ehlers is just the one that is fresh on my mind because the Jets do not have a coach and are once again at a point where it went, wow, we failed out of the first round in a year where we were supposed to be like serious contenders because Connor Hellebuck was amazing again. And you had all these really good seasons from good players on your team and you couldn't get it done because your coach held you back again, which, oh no, anyways.
So for me, Nikolaj Ehlers, the reason I wanted to talk about him was because we had 2 mailbag questions about him in the same vein. We're going to do Cole Perfetti another time, but I know you like to talk about him. So I was like, you know what, Scott, let's bring Nikolaj Ehlers up so that we can do it once a year. It can be our annual tradition. But in the meantime, that is it for our show today. I will have a special guest tomorrow, and I'm really excited about this because we have agreed to disagree already. We're going to be having that kind of the talk. And then the mailbag episode is also coming up later this week. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You can send us mailbag questions there also at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can also leave them in the YouTube comments. As you know, we love doing mailbag questions. And in the meantime, make sure, like I said, you're subscribed, all of that. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.